Yat bene. Good morning, my relatives. It is Tuesday morning, August 1st, believe it or not. And I'm sitting here with my second cup of coffee, and I want to have a discussion with you about Elon Musk and his app called X. And I want to talk about some incredible efforts that are happening to decolonize the Klamath River Basin by the native nations in both Oregon and California. And there's some really exciting stuff going on there. But before I begin, let me do as I always do, which is acknowledge I'm speaking to you from what's now called Washington or Washington, D.C. And these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. And I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of these lands. I want to thank them for their stewardship of the land. And I want to just state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. So I welcome you to grab your cup of coffee. And there's a few things I would love to discuss this morning if you have some time. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Elon Musk. As most of you know, there has been a bit of a negative, even visceral response to not only to the way that Elon Musk has managed Twitter since he bought it a while ago, but the way that he is now rebranding it and he's calling it his pet name X, which is the name he uses for a lot of things. Apparently, he has a vision of creating an app called X that someday will be kind of this all-encompassing, all-purpose app for finances and social media and many other things. He's named his son X. His space company is called SpaceX. There is a Tesla Model X. Elon Musk is a little bit obsessed with X. And if you use Twitter, right? Even just if you look in the past few weeks, the bird and the even the name Twitter has been replaced with nothing but an X. If you look up here in the top left-hand corner of the screen, you can see it is now just called X. And right, it's not just me. There's a lot of people who are a little bit upset about this. And I was trying to figure out and understand why. And I ran across an article the other day, and it was on the AP website. And I'm going to share it with you. Let me put it into the chat right now. It was an article. Let me find my chat here. It's called, the AP article is called Elon Musk Wants to Turn Tweets into X's, but Changing Language is Not Quite So Simple. And one of the things that this article reminded me of, it's something I knew and all of us know, right? Which is Twitter had done something with its brand recognition that very few corporations have ever done. Right? Xerox did it when they basically made their brand name the verb. I'm going to go Xerox something. I'm going to copy something. I'm going to make a photocopy of this. Xerox did that by their product became so used and so proliferated the market that to photocopy something became to Xerox something. Their brand became a verb. Google did the same thing, right? When you don't search something on Google, you Google something. They've made their brand the verb of what you do. And Twitter has done the same thing. They're not a very old company, and yet they have gained this ability to get their brand in such a global context and so common that we don't just post things on Twitter, we tweet. Right? It's something that we do. We tweet. And they have made their brand the verb. And so even though Elon Musk has changed the name Twitter to X, although he still uses the URL Twitter, and he's replaced the bird with an X, and he's trying to get us, he's actually removed the word tweet from the button, and it's now you post something, which are, again, it's some of the stupidest insane market strategy of ever, right? He has such this brand recognition, and he's just destroying it for his little thing with the letter X. But it's created a response in a lot of us, because what happened when we right? When the public, no one demanded that we start calling the process of photocopying Xerox. That's something the public did because everybody was using the same product, and it just became what we did. We Xerox something. The same thing with Google, right? It wasn't Google made that decision or the government made that decision. The public made the decision that we are now going to start calling this, when we use this service, we're going to Google something, we're going to look something up, we're going to search something. And it became so prolific throughout society that those words actually got added to the dictionary. And the same thing happened with Twitter, right? If you Google tweet, and let me just show you this online. If you Google the word tweet, right, you will find that the first definition is the chirp of a small young bird, and the second is a post made on the social media platform Twitter. That's the noun in definition. The verb definition of you make a chirping noise or you make a post, you tweet. So it became both a noun and a verb. And right, this is what we've done. And so Google uses the Oxford Language Dictionary. So if we look it up on actual dictionaries, here I looked up tweet on dictionary.com. Again, under noun, the first definition was a weak chirping sound. The second was a message posted on the Twitter social media service. As a verb, it's to make a weak chirping sound. And the verb as a digital technology was to post a message on Twitter. That's dictionary.com. Something very similar on Merriam-Webster, and then even on the Cambridge Dictionary. And so this has just become, right, this has become what we do now. We tweet. And as much as Elon Musk wants to rebrand his application as X and remove the bird from the thing, we can do something that I think billionaires rarely ever have happen to them, which is we can say no. We're not going to X on your site. We're going to tweet. We can continue to refer to the action we do there as tweet. And see, billionaires, and I'm positive of this, even though I'm not a billionaire, but I'm quite positive that billionaires very, very rarely ever experience someone telling them no. Why? Because they are wealthier than almost everybody they meet. And everybody they meet wants some piece of their wealth, some cut of the pie, some opportunity for the business. And so they affirm, they snuggle up to, right? They do what they want to do to get his approval. And so I'm positive billionaires are almost never told no. Right. As a speaker, you experience this a little bit, right? When I travel, and I noticed this a lot, and it's one of the things I really liked about living when we lived on the reservation is I would go and I would speak at these large events. And at these large events, a lot of people know you. And if it's a well-organized event, right, you usually have someone who's taking you around and bringing you to rooms, and you're meeting different people, and there's all these things going on, and you're kind of the center of everything that's going on, and people are enthralled by what you're talking about, and there's a lot of affirmation that happens. And I loved leaving those situations and going back to the reservation, right? Our dilapidated house, or even back to the Hogan, where I wasn't this national public speaker. I was just the guy next door who is trying to figure out how to live on the reservation. And I was, I love that. I love the fact because it inserts a massive dose of reality. Because if you live in that environment where you're constantly being affirmed, you're constantly the center of attention, you're constantly everyone's saying yes to you and wants your approval and blah, 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 that tweaks you psychologically. And I'm absolutely positive that's happened to not just Elon Musk, but pretty much every billionaire and even most of the millionaires out there, is because very few people probably ever tell them no. So we can tell Elon Musk no. Yes, you have control over what you name your app. You can call it X. Yes, you have control over what logo you want to use. You can put that god-awfully X up at the top of your screen. Yes, you can make horrible marketing decisions and destroy your brand recognition. That's fine. Guess what, Elon? we're still going to tweet. We are going to tweet on your app X. And so I encourage you to read that story. Again, I went a little further than the story did. The story was just kind of saying how basically the word tweet became a verb, and it became something that was associated specifically with Twitter, and even Elon Musk can't change that. So anyway, I encourage you to read that article. It's an interesting article, but yeah, I it got me thinking about Elon Musk, and most all billionaires need to be told no on a consistent basis. And this is one way we can tell Elon Musk no. And it doesn't just mean we do the action of tweeting. We have to call them tweets. We are tweeting on this thing. We have to even tag that in our post. So that's why I'm tweeting this. Let Elon Musk know, just because he's rebranded his app, the public still has a sense of ownership and stake in that, and we are going to call it tweeting. Anyway, there's a little kind of fun thing to think about and talk about. The next thing I want to share with you is something a bit more serious. And I was doing some reading the other day, and I came across this article that I want to post for you. It was in AP again. And let me go ahead and put this in there. It's an AP News article titled, "As Work Begins on the Largest U.S. Dam Removal Project, Tribes Look to a Future of Growth." And the Klamath River Valley, which is in Oregon and California, Southern Oregon and Northern California, is one of the third largest salmon producing river valleys or river basins in the country, I think they said, or at least on the Pacific Northwest. And ever since colonization, back in when the first colonizers began to come into the West Coast, probably even from Spain, right? This is in the 1820s. They began to do things like damming the rivers. And there has been a battle between the native nations, the tribal people, the native nations of that area. This is the Yurok, the Karuk, the Hupa, and the Klamath tribes. And they've been battling with them over keeping their rivers more natural. And then in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there were some major dams placed on the Klamath River, and it severely limited the ability of not only the salmon to spawn and to do what they needed to do, but also it disrupted the entire ecosystem. And then in the 60s and 70s, the tribes were still working to get these dams removed, and they began protesting more regularly. They actually took a lawsuit to the Supreme Court, and they won their case, but they still were not able to enforce it. And then in the early 2000s, in 2002, and I'm gonna share a few things with you here. I'm going to post, this is a site that has some photos, but in 2002 was a very dry year in the Pacific Northwest. And the flow in the river was already low because of the dams and because water was being diverted for commercial farming. And that year, in spite of the drought and the dry season, they began diverting even more water to some of the rivers. And there was a massive, what they called a fish kill. Over 30,000 Chinook salmon died just belly up in the river. Some of the pictures on that site are, if you click on that link I just put in there, I'm going to show a few of them to you here online. But just thousands and thousands of fish just died. And it was a really horrible, horrific tragedy for the fish, for the ecosystem, and also for the native nations who had cared for this river valley and lived there, for hundreds, even thousands of years. And that action brought about a study, it brought about a lot of research, and it brought the tribes together. And there was even a report that was done, a study that was done on what caused this massive uh, fish kill. And I'm going to put the link to the study in the chat as well. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that study. And I'm going to read a few things to you from that study regarding what they concluded. So let me bring this up for you. Let me show this to you. I didn't put this onto my site yet, but let me bring this up real quick. So, hold on just a second here. Okay, let me share this so you can see it. This is the report that I just shared. It's the Klamath River Fish Kill of 2002, Analysis of Contributing Factors by the Yurok Tribal Fisheries Program. And this was done in 2004. This is the final report. And I just want to look at the abstract here. So in the abstract, it says, in consideration of all pertinent data that led to the conclusion that in 2002, a relatively robust run of adult fall Chinook entered the Klamath River approximately 1 week earlier than usual. Environmental conditions in the river at the time of the 2002 fall run Chinook salmon run were characterized by low flow rates and volume and an apparent lack of migration cues to proceed upriver. The resultant migration delay, crowded conditions, and warm water temperatures provided an ideal environment for the proliferation of the parasite, and they give its scientific name. Isolation identification of causation factors to kill fish in general are complex tasks that generally do not identify a single independent cause. Rather, the cause of this fish kill was a unique combination of factors that led to severe outbreak. Despite the complexity of the fish kill, once the causation factors have been identified, one can formulate data-supported conclusions regarding likely contributing factors, and from those determine what management actions could have been undertaken to prevent such an outbreak. In this instance, low flow from the Iron Gate Dam was a substantial causation factor in the fish kill of 2002. It is also the only factor that is controllable by human action. Had the flow from the Iron Gate Dam in August and September been at or above approximately 1,000 CFS as they were in all other years, or above average escapements, it is likely that the fish kill would not have occurred. I didn't read this entire report, but it basically says what the native indigenous tribes from that area had known all along, which is you can't just dam a river and think it's not going to have an impact, right? You can't make such massive changes to your environment and not have it have a profound impact on life around you. And again, the tribes had been working for decades, even over a century, to get these dams taken down, to have the river restored and brought back to a healthy state. And white men didn't start paying attention because this fish kill in 2002 had massive economic impact on the region. Millions of dollars were lost. And that's what began to move the tribes to be able to make some progress in what they had been fighting for decades and even for over a century, which is they wanted to restore the river back to its original state. And so this year, right, there's a goal to remove 3 major dams along this river by the end of 2024. And the first of those dams is to begin to come down soon. And this is a massive victory for the Native nations of that area. This is a massive victory for the Yurok, the Karuk, the Hupa, and the Klamath tribes. And I don't even know how to begin to express how deeply grateful I am for our relatives there who have had the vision and the foresight to begin fighting for this the moment it began happening. and to point out that the problem was not just they weren't letting out enough water in 2002 in August and September. The problem is colonization. The problem is people who don't know the land they're living on, have no relationship to it, and only see it as an economic benefit and think they can just use it until they've sucked all the resources out of it. That's the problem. That's the causation. That's the thing that led to this horrific destruction. And I'm so grateful for the work of these Native nations to begin to their deep commitment to decolonizing their river basin, the river basin that they were given by Creator, that they have been stewarding for hundreds, even thousands of years. And there was another article I want to share this with you. This was in the student newspaper of the Cal Poly Humboldt campus newspaper, and I want to share this with you as well because the title of this article is Indigenous Activism Brings Down Klamath Dams. And I like the focus of this article because it truly points out that, yes, this life-giving process that's happening, this restorative process that's taking place here, is the efforts of Indigenous activism, of Native peoples working to steward the resources that they have always stewarded. I also want to share this other article here. This is another one just to educate yourself on this. There's an article in the Seattle Times, and it talks about the same dam removal. But in this article, there's actually a short, about a 9 or 10 minute documentary that talks about, again, the way the tribes of that area had been working for so long to restore this river basin back to what it needs to be. And so I wanted to take this some time today just to honor the Yurok, the Karuk, the Hupa, and the Klamath tribes. I want to thank my relatives for their deep commitment to steward these lands, even as they work to wrest control back of these lands from their colonizers. I'm so grateful that they are removing these dams and restoring not just the run for the salmon, but for all of the ways that will have a benefit for the entire ecosystem and for the globe as a whole. Right? We Western civilization has this mentality that's like, oh, we just because we can do something, right? And we do a study looking at 5 or 10 years that everything's going to be okay. And it's like, you have no clue, right? These things have taken hundreds, even thousands, even millions of years to develop and to form. And when you come in and make these radical changes in a few weeks or a few years or even a few decades, and you think, oh, this is not going to have an impact, it's like, no, it will. It absolutely will. And this is Western culture has not learned this lesson. They have not learned that just because they can do something, by no way, shape, or form does that give them the authority or even the right to do something. Western culture has so little wisdom, has so little wisdom. They're like a child with a bazooka, right? They literally are. And I love how these Native nations worked tirelessly over decades, centuries, to continue to stay on this message and to finally win the right to restore their river basin back to the way it should be. They didn't start a war. They didn't respond with the violence and the destruction that Western culture brings in its wake. They responded with the wisdom of a people who have learned how to coexist with their environment over the course of hundreds, even thousands of years. And this is what we need to learn, right? This is what Western culture needs to learn, is that just because it can do something, whether it has the money or the weapons or even the science and the technology, that by no means they should do something. And 9 times out of 10, right, Western culture just does not have the wisdom. They don't have the experience. They don't have the understanding to recognize the difference between what can be done and what should be done. I know they don't teach that at most of these universities, right? So anyway, those are my thoughts, my relatives. I celebrate today. I look forward to seeing what happens as these dams are removed in the next year and a half. I look forward to celebrating with the Native nations of the Klamath River Basin. And I hope to travel there at some point. I get up to Oregon and California fairly frequently. I would love to go there and visit and see these sites where these dams have come down and see the restoration that our relatives are doing to restore our land back to where it should be. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I love the fact that we have some time each week to drink a cup of coffee and talk about important things. Thank you for joining me. I see Aurora. Absolutely, Aurora. Water is life, right? You can't drink oil, right? You can't subsist off of dead fish. You can't exist apart from your environment, right? We need to remember these things. I want to thank everyone for joining today. There are so many good things that you all bring to the conversation. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you are still interested, for those of you who have not read my book yet, Unsettling Truths, I'm going to put a link for that into the post. And again, one of the things I want to just highlight for this here is I offer on my website what I call my 10 book special, where if you purchase 10 copies of my book from my website, I will give your book study over the course of the next year. You can schedule with me at your convenience a 45-minute virtual Q&A regarding the book. I've done several of these over the past several months. I love these conversations. I love the chance to discuss this book and the content with people who have already read it and have wrestled with it and are really thinking deeply about it. And it's one of the highlights of my week when I get to do one of these virtual book studies, Q&As. So if you would like to do that, right, go to my website and you'll see a chance to buy a single copy of my book that it's signed, or to buy 10 signed copies of my book and purchase this book study special. I also want to remind you that I am on Patreon, and I have several tiers on my Patreon site. The most basic tiers gives you ad-free access to all of my Second Cups of Coffee and other social media that I produce on my YouTube channel. But I also have other sites where you get access, or other tiers where you get access to a Q&A with me and a guest for my Second Cup of Coffee, in-depth discussions about my upcoming book, Unsettling Truths, our presentations that I give regarding Lincoln and other things like that. So there's a lot of opportunities for you to partner with me in both engaging these dialogues, but also to go deeper and to have more discussion about these things on my Patreon site. So if you're interested in that, I welcome you to subscribe to me on Patreon. I hope to be back again. I don't think I'll be back on Thursday. I have some things going on Thursday, but I'm hoping to do another Second Cup of Coffee on Friday. So until then, my relatives, walk in beauty, I hope your cup of coffee is as good as mine is, and may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Kahat and Hakona.